Namaskar. Today we will be continuing with our second module. We will be doing the third lecture of the second module, and this is lecture 8, where we will be talking about strategic planning, sales objectives, strategies and tactics. This particular lecture will talk about how planning is done, how various objectives are chosen out keeping in mind the broad planning, and what are the various strategies and tactics that are employed to actually achieve the various objectives. The various topics which we will be covering would be strategic planning, sales strategies, the basics of sales objectives, sales strategies and tactics, and then we shall also be discussing the relationship between sales objectives, sales strategies and tactics. Now, let us first start with strategic planning. What is planning? Now, planning is something which we do when we need to decide on a future course of action. So, what to do, how to do, when to do, these are all certain questions which we ponder on when we do any kind of a planning exercise. Planning is absolutely essential because until unless we plan, we will not be able to attain our objectives. Strategic planning is defined as an organizational process which helps the company decide on its long-term objectives and the subsequent strategies. So, we talk about strategic planning as something which is undertaken as an exercise by the senior management to decide on the long-term objectives of the organization and to decide on the various strategies that must be employed to attain the long-term objectives. Senior managers are responsible for the formulation and the execution of the strategic plans of an organization, and these strategic plans then get broken down into different functional areas, be it marketing, be it operations, be it R&D, finance, HR and so forth. So, until unless we start with strategic planning, we cannot move ahead. It will tell us, or it will give us a direction into which the course of future path for the organization, the course of actions to be taken or employed to be able to achieve the organizational objectives. Now, planning in large organizations is done at 3 or 4 organizational levels. We have the corporate strategic plan. We also have the divisional plans. If the organization is small or medium, we may stop. If it is medium, not small, but if it is medium, we may stop at the divisional level. But if it is a large organization which is spread across geography and deals with different kinds of products or deals with different kinds of customer segments, in those cases we also and has many different strategic business units. In those cases we also have business unit strategic plans, and then of course we have product functional plans. So, in cases where the organization is medium sized, we have the corporate plan and we have the divisional plans and the product functional plans. But in case the organizations are very large, then we have a corporate strategic plan which is the umbrella, and under the umbrella we have the different divisional plans, we have the different strategic business unit plans, and we also have the product functional plans. Of course, in small organizations, planning is done by everybody and it is also, those plans are executed and implemented by everybody in the organization. Now, let us first talk about corporate strategic planning. The corporate strategic planning is undertaken and the exercise is undertaken at the headquarters of the company, and the objective of the corporate strategic plan is to guide the entire organization. It lays down the broad goals that are to be achieved in the long term, and all the various divisions, all the various business units of the organization work under this strategic plan which has been set up by the corporate headquarters. So, what are the steps followed in the corporate strategic plan? One is to define the mission and objectives of the organization. What is the long-term vision that the company has? What is the mission statement? And then what are the objectives of the organization? Thereafter, it entails defining the different strategic business units or the SBUs. Now, SBUs are independent units in their own. They have their own, functioning well within the, what has been prescribed by the corporate plan. So, these various strategic business units of the organization are defined. Thereafter, keeping in mind the growth rate, keeping in mind the market attractiveness, keeping in mind other macro and micro environmental factors, keeping in mind the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, resources are allotted amongst different strategic business units. and then the various strategies are formulated to fill in the strategic planning gap. So we first start with defining the vision and the mission. We define the broad objectives. Thereafter, we define the various strategic business units of the organization or the company. Thereafter, we assign resources amongst the different business units, and once the resources have been assigned to different business units, we develop strategies to fill in the strategic planning gap. So this is what we do at the corporate strategic planning level. The next is the SBU level strategic planning, where planning is done by the business unit, by different business units, generally by the head of the unit, who defines the long-term mission of the company, as well as the objectives, the goals, the strategies. So the the strategic plan, the corporate strategic plan has already been laid down by the corporate headquarters. Thereafter, it is left upon the strategic business units to do their own planning. This planning exercise is undertaken by the top management of the SBU, generally by the head of the unit, and he defines the long-term mission of the company, as well as the objectives, the goals, and the various strategies. What are the different steps which are followed in the strategic business unit level planning or SBU strategic planning? Are first to define the mission of the business unit. What is the mission of the business unit? Of course, this will be very much in line with the vision that the company has or the organization has. Second, to examine the company's internal and external environment. So here the job is to go in for a SWOT analysis. We have discussed earlier the micro and the macro environment. The micro environment comprising forces which are controllables, which can be controlled by the company, and those factors which affect the governance of the company directly. These also give the company its strengths and weaknesses. Thereafter, we also have to study the external environment or the macro environment, where forces of which affect the functioning indirectly, and these forces provide to the company opportunities and threats. So after the SBU level have defined their mission, they then have to move on to study the external and internal environment facing a company, and they must identify the various strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats which the organization faces, the various strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, so that appropriate strategies can be formulated, appropriate courses of action can be taken, so that the company can take advantages of the opportunities, it can fight the threats. The third step here is to define the long-term objectives and to prepare strategies to achieve those objectives. So then what the company next has to do is to define the long-term objectives of the SBU and prepare strategies to achieve these objectives. Again, the long-term objectives will be very well laid down in keeping in line the corporate objectives. Thereafter, the business unit head has to decide on the action plans. He has to actually prepare the action plans well under the keeping in mind the strategies, and then he has to implement the strategies through these action plans. Finally, what he has to do is to monitor the results, monitor the performance, and go in for corrective measures if required. So these are different steps that must be followed in business unit strategic planning level. The third comes the product or the operational planning. Now, in organizations which are medium sized, there is no need for an exercise where the SBU and the division level planning is done separately. There it is done together. So we straight away move to product and operational planning. Now, product and operational planning is done keeping in mind the particular business unit for each product. And various aspects of product or operational planning are as follows. One, it is done at lower levels of the organization, and it relates to routine tasks. It relates to things like raw material procurement, production and operations, transportation of the goods, the sale of the goods. All of this pertains typically to the business unit for a particular product, and different kinds of functional plans such as marketing, production, HR, and finance are taken care of by functional managers to execute the routine tasks. So this planning or product or operational planning is basically done for a particular business unit which deals with a particular product only. So this is how we go about into product and operational planning. Now, let us see the role of marketing in organizational planning. So, when we talk of the corporate level, it is providing information about potential customers as well as market competition, also to support customer orientation and protect their interests. So, it is very important that the customer is given importance all the time, as we have seen earlier, and at the corporate level it is essential that the sales and marketing team provides information about potential customers as well as about the competition that exists, also supports customer, gives a focus or lays a focus on customer orientation to protect their interests always. At the SBU level, it is to prepare long-term business strategies by analyzing the information about customers, about the market competition, and also take decisions with respect to the segmentation, targeting and positioning. So, it is more to do with the STP exercise by analyzing information about customers and about market competition. And at the functional level, it is implementation of various marketing plans, which will include the 4 Ps and the sales strategy. So, if we look at the SBU level, it is more of the strategic plan, the marketing strategic plan that is given importance, and at the functional level, it becomes more of the marketing tactical plans that are given more importance. So, the SBU level, we would be talking about the strategic part and strategic role, and we will also speak about the strategic plans at the SBU which are discussed at the SBU level, but at the functional level it is more to do with the marketing tactical plans or the 4 marketing mix plans which are taken into account. So, while the SBU will take care of the segmentation, targeting and positioning, giving a customer orientation and a value proposition, the functional level would take care of how to design the 4 Ps or how to design the marketing mix, how to go in for tactical planning so that the various tasks can be accomplished and the market, the company could actually benefit. So, now, let us move now to the sales strategy, which actually is a very strategic decision. Sales strategies are developed for individual customers or clients. Now, these sales strategy, the marketing strategy is very broad, and as we said, takes into account the strategic part, takes into account the tactical part, strategic with the STP and value proposition, tactical with the 4 Ps. But the sales strategy here typically pertains to an individual customer or to a client, and we will term these as accounts. So, it deals with a particular account. A client is actually regarded as an account, and the strategic decisions are formulated by categorizing many of these individual accounts or individual customers into similar clusters. So, while every customer is treated as a separate entity, as a separate account, especially in the case of B2B, many of these may often be clustered or categorized into similar clusters. Now, a sales strategy comprises the following. 1, it is classifying the accounts or classification of accounts. 2, the relationship strategy to be followed. 3, the selling methods to be followed, and 4, the channel strategy. So, let us first talk about the classification of accounts. Now, it's very important for any marketer to classify his accounts based on the sales and profit potentials, so that he can accordingly deal with these customers. He can make his presentations accordingly, he can give after sales accordingly. He would also be able, the sales manager would be able to delegate the salespersons or the salespeople accordingly to cater to each of these categories based on the profit, sales and profit potentials. So, based on the different sales and profit potentials that the individual accounts hold, or take care, or maybe outsource it to brokers or to other agents. 2, it would also give salespeople an insight into the kind of importance that they have to pay to these different clusters or to these different individual clients based on their sales and profit potential. So, the sales presentation that must be made, the manner in which the customer has to be dealt with both during sale and post sale, all of these would be determined, much easier it would be for the sales team and for the sales manager to determine if the accounts are actually classified and categorized based on their sales and profit potentials. So the objective here is to identify the market segment and subsequently classify an individual customer on an account within the target market segment into high, medium or low sales and profit potentials. So once the target market is defined, the customers within the target market would be classified into high sales and profit potentials, medium sales and profit potentials, and low sales and profit potentials. And accordingly, a sales strategy would be developed for each of the individual accounts. As we said earlier, those who are into the high sales and profit potential category may be treated as one cluster. Those who are in the medium sales and profit potential may be treated as another cluster, and those who are low on sales and profit potentials may be treated as another cluster. Accordingly, the sales strategy may be formulated. Okay, the second thing that comes into play is the relationship strategy. Now, in B2B scenarios, typically buyers and sellers forge relationships, and these relationships, as we have discussed earlier, could range from transactional relationships to collaborative relationships. So the type of relationship, whether it would be transactional or value added or collaborative, depends upon both the buyer and the seller, and the company here decides as to which of the target segment and which of the individual account can be considered for a collaborative relationship, or should be considered only for a transactional relationship, or should be considered for a value added relationship. So this relationship building between the buyer and seller would be based on the needs and requirements of both the buyer and the seller, and could lie anywhere on a continuum from transactional to value added to collaborative. So what is transactional, what is value added, or what is collaborative? Let us discuss this now. Now, as we have briefly mentioned in another presentation earlier, the transactional relationship is where a buyer contacts a seller, buys a particular product and then does not go back to him. Neither does the seller expect him to come, or even if he does not make any efforts to bring the buyer back. So customers switch from suppliers or from buyers often because of low prices, and they exhibit very little loyalty to the particular suppliers. So typically we see, especially in the B2B scenario, it would be typically a price driven decision, and once a product is bought, the client or the customer may not go back to the supplier or the vendor again, and neither would the vendor or the supplier make any effort to bring him back. So this is what we call as a transactional relationship. In the case of a value added relationship, these are customers with medium sales and profit potentials, and they are of some value to the supplier or to the seller. So salespeople provide emphasis to understand the present and the future needs of these customers, and they try to help them out. So the relationship here is referred to as a value added relationship. It is noteworthy to mention here that in most cases transactional relationship customers are, or those who prefer a transactional relationship generally are cases where they are low sales and profit potential customers. That is one of the reasons why the seller or why the supplier also does not go out of the way to bring them back or into their own fold. So, but however, in the case of value added, because these customers or because this cluster comprises those who have medium sales and profit potential, and they could be valuable in the future, so salespeople provide emphasis on meeting their current needs as well as try to assess their future needs, and so that they can satisfy them better and they can retain these people. The third is the strongest relationship, where we have collaborative relationships and partnerships. These are long-term mutually satisfying relationships. Generally, a marketer or a supplier would be interested to have this kind of relationship with those customers or the cluster of customers who are actually high on sales and profit potential. So, both parties desire long-term relationships. The buyer or the client desires a long-term relationship because he does not have to deal with many of the suppliers or many sellers, and he does not have to change them too frequently. So his switching costs are also low, his operational costs are also low, and so he prefers this kind of a relationship. On the other hand, the seller or the supplier also likes this kind of a relationship, because one, it is long term. Two, instead of having many small fishes, he has few big ones who are bigger sales and with bigger sales and profit potentials. So he also prefers having such big customers or such big clients. So it is a joint problem solving and consolidation of business processes of the two organizations, often leading to partnerships, and these partnerships are clear, long term partnerships. So clear cut terms and conditions are laid out and agreements are signed, and both collaborate with each other to forge such long term relationships. Third is with respect to selling methods. So the selling method is the third element in the sales strategy. Salespeople use different kinds of selling methods depending upon the kind of customer, whether he has high, medium or low sales and profit potentials. Also, this decision would with the kind of selling methods they use will also depend upon the relationship style or the relationship strategy which both the parties desire. So salespeople use different selling methods based on the sales and profit potentials of the customers as well as the different relationship strategies, and the selection of an appropriate strategy or selling method is very, very important. For class A, which is the customers who have high sales and profit potentials and who are major customers, who are key customers, the companies generally pursue a collaborative relationship, and in such cases companies consider team selling method or consultative selling method as the most valuable. Now, what is a team selling method? As we discussed in the previous slide, that both parties join hands and want to maintain this relationship for long, and both understand the future needs of each other. So keeping this in mind, the selling method that is followed is very cross functional, it is very multidisciplinary, where both the parties decide to handhold each other and work together, one, and also the sales team is cross functional, multidisciplinary, where they have people from different departments who take part in the sales presentations, who take part in the selling process. So it is both the buyer and the seller getting into long-term relationships, joining hands, understanding each other's needs, understanding each other's constraints, and thereafter the sales selling method is such which involves both technical, non-technical personnel. It's a team selling approach, a consultative selling method, so that both the customer as well as the company can benefit through this long-term relationship. On the other hand, for the class B type of customers, which have medium sales and profit potential, companies have value-added relationships and consider adopting a consultative style. Okay, so pure based on participation with each other, consultation with each other, solutions are reached. But in class C customers, who are the large, a big base of customers but smaller ones, and they have low sales and profit potential, companies adopt a transactional method and they consider a stimulus response method or a formula based method of selling. We will be talking about the stimulus response and the formula method of selling in the subsequent lectures. Finally, there is this channel strategy. This is the fourth element of the sales strategy, where the job is to select an appropriate channel, marketing channel or distribution channel or trade channel, as the word may be used synonymously, and it is a strategic issue in the sales strategy. It is also called the sales channel. So selecting an appropriate channel, which is the marketing channel or the distribution channel or the trade channel, is a strategic issue in the sales strategy, and it is also called a sales channel. Now, there can be different kinds of sales channel for covering different selling efforts. The company could have its own sales force, its own representatives, it could have dealers and distributors, it could have independent representatives like brokers and commission agents, it could have go in for telemarketing, it could sell online or through the internet. And today what is the day and age, whether it is B2B or B2C, is of hybrid channels, where different channels or number of channels are used by both the buyers and the sellers to enter into transactions. So there are cases where people first check things online and then purchase things offline. Vice versa is also true. So we have different kinds of sales channels which may be used by different class of customers at different times, and so the marketer must keep their options broad and open. Now we come to the sales objectives, strategies and tactics. The sales objectives of an organization is to have a good sales, to have good profits, and it's good large market shares, it's good customer base, loyalty, satisfied customers. So the goals and objectives related to sales are derived from the organization's marketing objectives and goals, and the marketing objectives of course are determined from the corporate objectives and goals. So broadly, at the broad or at the umbrella head, we have the corporate goals, and there we have the marketing objectives, and keeping in mind the marketing objectives, the sales objectives of the organization are set forth. Now there is a strong relationship between the objectives, strategies and tactics. Strategies are defined as the ways of achieving the objectives. Okay, and tactics are defined as those activities which should be carried out to achieve the strategies. So, in order to achieve your strategies, you require tactics. Tactics will help achieve your strategies, and these strategies will help achieve your sales objectives and your marketing objectives. So what can be the various kinds of strategies and tactics which a company can have? It could be entering export markets, it could be penetrating deeper into existing domestic markets, it could be optimizing your sales force performance, try to get maximum out of your sales force, make them more effective, efficient, and make effective use of your channel partners or your trade partners. Any and all of these could be different kinds of sales strategies and tactics which would help achieve the marketing objectives of the organization. So you have here the tactics which actually help achieve your strategies and which are going to help achieve your objectives. So you decide or you set your objectives. From those objectives you develop your strategies, and from those strategies you have to evolve your tactics or your action plans, so that the action plans can help achieve the strategies, and the strategies would be helping achieve the objectives that the company wants to attain. So a company, for example, may want to increase its sales of its electric vehicles by 10% as one of its sales objectives. So what does it do? It can enter new market segments. So the broad sales goal or the broad sales objective here is to increase sales by 10%. So what would be the marketing strategy? What would be the commensurate sales and distribution strategy? And what would be the tactics? Let us look at this now. For example, if a company wants to increase the sales of its electric vehicles by 10%, it can offer it can adopt any of the two marketing strategies, or it can adopt both. One, it could penetrate existing systems. Two, it could enter newer segments, maybe new geographic territories, states, countries, etc. So if it is in case of the first, where we talk of entering new segments, it could be new states or new countries. So what would be the sales and distribution strategy? One, identify those states, identify those countries where the company would want to enter, and then decide on the appropriate channel, direct or indirect, especially in this case, whether it would be exclusive or it would be selective. And then the marketing, the action plan or the tactic would be that the marketing department and the sales team gather enough information about the viability of such segments and decide on the distribution channel, select, train and guide the channel members or the marketing intermediaries. So this would be the way they would go about through gathering information, looking at the viability of the segment, and then deciding on distribution channel and sales force management. It would be able to finally be able to achieve its sales goal or its objectives of increasing sales by 10%. Another marketing strategy that it could adopt would be to penetrate existing markets. Now, to penetrate existing markets, again, it would have to emphasize upon proper sales force management, make effective and efficient use of the trade or channel intermediaries. So this becomes a part of the sales and distribution strategy. But to actually achieve this, what the tactics or the action plans would involve: add channel members, select them, train them, provide adequate compensation to them, train sales managers to perform team leader roles, also link the sales volume quota or the sales volume targets to the rewards and the compensation plan. So in this way, these strategies, these action plans or these tactics will actually be a part of the sales and distribution strategy, which would again be in line with the marketing strategy, and through this the sales objectives of a 10% increase in sales, the marketing objective of increasing market share will actually be achieved. So this is how we relate the sales objectives, the sales strategies and the tactics. So again, another thing could be, when we talk about sales management actions and tasks, this also gets related to the distribution channel. So if the sales management task or action is effective market coverage, this would involve lead generation, prospecting, sales call, pre-approach, approach, follow-up. Now with respect to lead generation, prospecting, sales calls, approach, pre-approach, these are things which we will be dealing in subsequent module when we talk about the selling process. Another sales, so commensurate to the sales management action, a distribution management role would be sales calls, whether it is B2B or B2C with channel partners, follow-up call plans, and using multiple channels or hybrid channels. If we talk of another sales task, which is handling complaints, the distribution role here becomes prompt action, and in case of problems which are serious or of a bigger nature, it's important to involve the marketing team, to senior sales manager, even the people in the R&D and operations. And if it is with respect to for example, another thing which could discuss could be local advertising and sales promotion. If this is a sales management task, commensurate to it would be distribution task, could be coordinating with other channel partners or channel distribution channels, co-sharing of these expenses, etc. So this is how we see that the sales management tasks also get related to the distribution management role. So with this we come to an end of this lecture. The references are still Cundiff, Govoni and Puri, Sales and Distribution Management 6th edition, Pearson, India. Havaldar and Kawale, Sales and Distribution Management Text and Cases, 3rd edition, Tata McGraw-Hill. Pandey and Sahdev, Sales and Distribution Management, 2011, Oxford University Press. And Futrell, Fundamentals of Selling, McGraw-Hill Education. This brings us to an end of the 3rd lecture on the 2nd module of this course. We will move with the next lecture and we will be continuing with this topic. Thank you.